If you want to make a vegan cake without eggs, but you're afraid it's not going to come out moist enough, or if you, like me and so many others before you, have been victimized by some dry vegan cake, don't worry, I got you. Today I'm showing you how you can make a moist cake without eggs and dairy. Are you ready? Let's do this. Oh, and just a warning that the word moist is going to be said so many times throughout this video. I don't love it, I know you don't either, but it's the only way to describe that in a cake. It's the opposite of a dry cake. There's no other word for it, so we're just gonna have to go with it. So without further ado, this is how you get a vegan moist cake. So in today's video, I'm gonna be covering 1, why so many vegan cakes are just dry cake central, just not moist enough. 2, how you can make sure that your eggless vegan cake comes out moist and delicious. And 3, some recipes that are eggless and dairy free and are absolutely guaranteed to be a super moist, delicious cake. And if you're wondering what makes me qualified to tell you about moist vegan cakes, well, if we haven't met, hi, I'm Natalia Lima, founder and owner of Curious Cat Bakery, an all-vegan award-winning bakery based out of Florida where I make everything taste just like or better than the real deal. And people love my cakes. They write me about it, they write reviews about them. They are absolutely delicious, if I can say so myself. But before I cracked the code on vegan baking, I ate a lot of really bad dry cake. I know what that tastes like, I know the pain, and I'm not here for it. I'm putting an end to it. So this is the place where I share my tips, hacks, and recipes. So if you're into all of that, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. So here's some of the reasons why so many vegan cakes just are so freaking dry, and why yours might be coming out dry too. Like, seriously, why? First one is overbaking. Pretty obvious one. You leave a cake in the oven for longer than it needs to be and it's gonna dry out. So the way that you avoid this is by doing a toothpick test. So you get a clean toothpick, you insert it into the middle of the cake. If it comes out full of batter, it still needs to cook, but if it comes out clean, you're ready to go. Now, most people will tell you that the toothpick should come out like squeaky clean. I think you should have a couple of crumbs in there, because when you take the cake out of the oven, like, the cake just doesn't magically stop baking the moment you take it out of the oven. So I say make sure a couple of crumbs are still clinging to that toothpick, because once you take that cake out, it's going to bake for a little while longer and then you're gonna be perfect. Meanwhile, if you wait until the toothpick comes out completely clean, then that continued baking after it comes out of the oven might get it overboard and put you into that dry zone, which is not what we want. Number 2 is overmixing. When you're mixing your wet and your dry ingredients into a recipe, don't overdo it. You want to just carefully fold it. And if you're like me, the only image that flashed in your mind right now is Moira and David Rose folding it. Just fold it. If that's the case, please just write it in the comments, fold it, so that I know that we know. Going back to the folding now, you want to just carefully fold it in though, for real. You want it to be one single mixture, but don't overdo it, because that's going to develop the gluten too much and then you're just going to have a stodgy cake at the end of the day. Don't do it. Just mix it in so it's even, but don't go overboard. But not necessary. In fact, it's working against you. Number 3 is that you don't have enough wet ingredients. Pretty obvious one. If your batter is looking very dry and lumpy, it's not gonna get any better once you start baking it. So make sure you have enough liquid in there, whether that's a plant-based milk or oil. Make sure that batter is liquid enough, because if it's a dry batter, it's gonna be a dry cake. Another reason is that you may not have enough fat in your batter. So eggs in a recipe add fat and they add moisture. It's just a couple of the many hats that eggs wear in a recipe. So once you take eggs out of the equation and you're making an eggless cake, well, then you gotta replace that moisture and that fat. I have plenty of videos here on the channel where I explain how to replace eggs in a recipe. Very long story short, it's not a simple formula. I go into a little more detail on this video over here. You're gonna have to find the solution that works best for your specific recipe. Now, if you already made your vegan cake and it came out dry and you think that the lack of fat might be the problem, you can add more oil, more vegan butter, or even a fattier milk like coconut milk, and that might solve your fat problem. And the lack of fat in vegan cakes sometimes is tied to this other reason why your cakes might be coming out dry, which is a lack of sugar. Now, in this video over here, I explained how a lot of beginner vegan bakers make this one crucial mistake, which is try to make not only a vegan cake, but a vegan cake plus, which is a vegan cake plus it's also gluten-free, Plus it's also fat-free, plus it's also sugar-free. Like, no, just don't do that. It's a bad idea. You might want to watch this video over here where I explain to you why this is a bad idea. But basically, one of the reasons why sugar is there is not only to make things sweet, it helps with structure, it also retains water. So once you take out sugar and you try to replace it with something else, or you try to lower the amount of sugar so it's sugar-free or diet or whatever you want to call it, then not only you're removing something that's crucial to the recipe, you're also removing an ingredient that retains water, and that's going to make your cake dry. How do you make sure that your vegan cake does not come out like that dry, horrible doorstop that people take one bite of and just slowly push away from them? Like, no thank you, I'm actually on a diet. Oh no, I'm so full, I just had lunch. If people push away your cake, you know there's something wrong with it. Everybody always has room for cake. But anyways, here's some tips to make sure that your cake never gets pushed aside. One of the things you can do is soak your cake. Right after it comes out of the oven, you do a mix of water and sugar, and you're just gonna brush that on top of your cake. That warm cake is gonna soak up that mixture just like a sponge, making a very moist cake. To frost your cakes as soon as possible. You obviously want them to cool off before you put any frosting on, otherwise it will just slide right off and it won't be pretty. But you do want to make sure that you frost them as soon as possible, as soon as they're cool, because in the same way that a piece of bread will dry out if you leave it out on the counter, your cakes will too. The more that it's exposed to the air and it's just sitting there, it's going to lose its moisture. So frost it, and basically you're just locking that moisture inside of it. When you're frosting and decorating your cakes, another option is to use wet fillings. Something like jam, chocolate ganache, or even a glaze are all very wet and will soak into the cake. I have a few recipes for those in this video over here. I suggest you check that out. Another trick that I explained in this video is that you can poke holes in your cake, and then that filling is really going to soak in and going to seep in through the cracks. Seeping in through the cracks is usually a bad thing, but when it comes to cakes, a very good thing. It's going to absorb it, and you're going to have like little veins of like chocolate ganache for your cake, which is never a bad idea. And finally, store your cake properly. You can't just leave your cake out on the fridge, especially if it's cut into. It's going to dry it out real fast. You always want to make sure that your cake is in an airtight container. And of course, a cake will never be more moist than the day that it's baked. The longer it goes out in the open or in a container, it will dry out slowly. If you don't think you're gonna eat it, I mean, seriously though, who leaves cake just for days on end? I never had this problem. But if you do, just put it in a container and freeze it, and then basically you're stopping time instead of letting it slowly lose its moisture over the days. Now if you like some recipes of cakes that are absolutely delicious, super moist, eggless, and dairy-free, I do have quite a few here on the channel. I'll put the links in the description below. I can't even choose a favorite. I think the Biscoff one would probably be my all-time favorite, but it's hard. I mean, the Taylor Swift one is a close second. Like, so good. Believe me, all of the ones here, so good. So there you go. I hope this helped you figure out how to make vegan cakes moist and delicious. If this video was helpful to you, one small thing that you can do is give it a like. It will show YouTube that there was some useful information in here, and it's worthy of pushing it to more vegans in the algorithm. If you want to learn some more about how to make vegan cakes, this video might be really helpful to you. And if you're just getting started with vegan baking, I was there once, and in this video I explained how I went from being a complete novice to owning an award-winning bakery. I will talk to you guys soon. Until then, stay curious.